Yeah, Frank here. He's got his own billiard room.
Yes, it's what do you call it, Kramer?
The billiard room.
No. The name.
The billiard?
Not billiard. Not the billiards. It was... Come on, Rudd. Come on. We call it the
place to be.
The place to be, yes. It's the place to be.
Then I shall be there.
Now, it's time. Live and in living color.
The Grandy Man can.
Time to play the game!
Well, you always left me satisfied and smiling, so...
That's what she said!
Why do I want this?
Yeah.
Because I want to make bank, bro. I want to get ass. I want to drive a Range Rover.
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, it is now time for the Place to Be Podcast. And now your hosts, Justin Rosero and Scott Criscolo.
Place to Be Nation, welcome back to another exhilarating episode of the Place to Be Podcast. I am your co-host, Justin Rosero, and no, we are not riding to the hospital in ambulances like Apollo Creed and Rocky Balboa in the beginning of Rocky II, which is when that song by Bill Conti played. It's a great song. And joining me, as always, fresh out of, I don't even know where he is, Norwalk maybe tonight? I'm not sure. He's in one of his many homes around the country, and that is my PIC, Scott Criscolo.
Jet setting, shall we say. Yes, jet setting from church to God knows where. Good to talk to you, sir. How are you tonight?
Not too bad, not too
I'd
bad.
say something. That theme pumps me up, you know. And I think about Rocky's eye hanging out of his skull and Apollo spitting up blood from his 10 broken ribs, and you get the tingles. It's the greatest.
Yeah, it's very underrated Rocky II, I think.
It actually was one of my favorites for a long time, and then I have to say Rocky III probably surpassed it. After watching it enough times.
Yeah, so we might have to do a full Rocky podcast one night, I think.
Oh, I don't think there's any doubt. There's no doubt. I think we have to do a Rocky podcast. We have to do a podcast of sports movies in general. That might be a pretty good discussion.
Yes, I agree. But tonight we're going to use that song as our theme, because the theme of tonight's show is redemption.
Yes.
Because there's one man that was looking for redemption, and that man was Hulk Hogan. And we're going to be talking about that because I don't know who has the keys. I think we might have lost them. You may have them, but we are breaking...
I have the keys.
Okay, we're going to break open the vintage vault tonight.
Yep.
And we are going to be talking about Wrestlemania IV.
Yep.
That is one of my favorite opens. I love the slot machine with the WWF coins flying out of it.
Oh, absolutely. I wonder if they were giving them away that night. if you had tickets to it, maybe they gave the coins away. It would have been pretty smart too.
That would definitely be pretty cool.
But yes, March 27th, 1988.
Yes.
From the Trump Plaza Hotel and Casino in Atlantic City, New Jersey. Now, a lot of people think this is a downgrade from the Silverdome, but I mean, you can't have it at a dome every year.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about this a lot on our WrestleMania Listomania podcast, and I go back and forth at this arena. I like how it's such a unique look, and as we'll chronicle between this and the next year's WrestleMania V, having it in the same building with the story they told was very symmetrical. And it was unique. It was a cool look. But as a wrestling arena, it's not very good.
No, it's not. It's a convention center. It's like a place where people have trade shows, maybe concerts. But remember, this is in the pre-years of big video screens and things of that nature. So it was a very flat arena. It was like one big set of seats, and it was like beveled at the ends. Mm-hmm. There was no real levels. I don't think there were. No, it was a convention center. There really wasn't any levels.
Yeah, no, it was just straight up.
It was straight up. So it was if you were far away, the seats kind of sucked. But
the entrance is cool though. That long entrance down the ramp instead of
long
straight
ramp
to the
with
ring.
with the yellow carpeting.
Yeah, it's definitely very 80s. That was for sure.
Absolutely. I want to preface this first. I've been thinking about. It's funny. I normally don't think about what I'm going to say when you and I get together, but this one I wanted to say because
I'm glad you put a lot of prep work into these. I'm sure our fans enjoy that.
Well, because you don't want to sound pre-recorded either. I mean, prep work's one thing, but acting, you don't want to. Except Andrew Reich, who I think writes all of his F-bombs down. But anyway, no, we love you, Andrew. But no, my point is, for those that because this is a long pay-per-view. So
Yes.
for those that have not, I know this will sound weird to say, but for those that have not read or have not listened to our Royal Rumble 88 podcast, what we recommend is if you've already listened to this one, turn this one off, listen to the Royal Rumble 88 podcast first, then come back to this one. Because we're not going to go over the whole, for those that are new to wrestling and want to learn the backstory, the whole thing about the Hulk Hogan, Andre the Giant, and the main event pay-per-view, and him and Andre Hogan losing the title, and the two refs, and Steve Yoffney, and all that kind of stuff. We went over that whole thing at the Royal Rumble 88 review because we knew this show was going to take a while to talk about, and we didn't want this podcast to be 3 hours.
Right.
So just a recommendation. We're not telling you not to listen. Just maybe you want to close this one, listen to the Royal Rumble 88 podcast first, just to give
or at
yourself...
least, even if you have, maybe if you want a refresher, the end of the 88 Rumble, we went into the main event and everything. So even if you listen to the last, 15, 20 minutes of that one, you should get the picture for the build to the show.
And then come back to this one. And then you'll be all prepped and ready to go. So just not a word of warning. It's kind of a disclaimer. Just if you don't know the backstory, you might kind of get lost as we start this. Just, pause this one. Open up the Royal Rumble 88 one. Even if you don't want to listen to the part about the actual Rumble, like Justin said, zip ahead I don't know, an hour and 15 minutes or so. The last 15
not even that far because I think we actually ended up talking more about the main event and the aftermath than we did the Rumble.
Yeah, that's true. So maybe try and get the last 20. Yeah, Justin's right about the last 20 minutes, just to give yourself a backstory of what happened at that main event show and all of that, and then come back to this one. And then you'll be properly prepared. You won't be kind of lost if you're new to the wrestling. That's one thing Justin and I want to do while we do our Vintage Vault specials here on the Place to Be podcast. We want to make sure our younger fans, who may not know a lot of what went on, in the late '80s, early '90s, we want to make sure you're informed. We don't want you to be lost. And obviously for our more experienced fans, if you just want to listen for entertainment value, of course listen. But if you know it like him and I do, then just you're ready to go right now.
And I also want to apologize ahead of time for my random loud hacking coughing that's probably gonna pop up during the show because I'm on the tail end of this cold. But
no, you sound a lot better than you did during the head. Yeah, you sound a lot better than you did during the headline show. The headline show, you made me a little nervous, but you battled through it. But you sound a lot better tonight.
Thank you.
Trump Plaza Hotel and Casino, Atlantic City, New Jersey. 18,165, which seems like a very high number for. I always think, I'll defend the 93,173 to the hilt for WrestleMania 3. I know some people say it's in the 70s. But to me, honestly, 18,000 seems like a pretty high number for a convention center. Yeah. I think the number might be a little inflated. Not by much, maybe 1,500 or 2,000 seats. I can't see 18,000 in a convention center setting. I might be wrong, but it just didn't seem like it was that many people. That many. But I don't know.
And now this show's actually, and I guess we'll get to that more in the final analysis, but it's a very divisive show. Because it's one of those ones that's, if you like it, it's pretty much based purely in nostalgia, I think. Because the show itself, as we go through it, we'll see, is no great shakes as far as, actual card goes. But it is a lot of fun to watch just because tournaments are always fun. And really, to me, 88 is like that transition year to where a lot of the older guard that helped usher in the, rock and wrestling era and the major WrestleMania 3 show. 88 is where they all start to kind of fade away, and late 88 is where we start to see, well, at least for my generation, a lot of the guys that would debut that, I first became fans of, the guys through 89, 90, 91, 92, those guys. So 88 is really a big transition year, and we'll kind of start that transition here, I think.
Yeah, you'll see guys, this is the first pay-per-view, in my opinion, and I'm sure you agree, where a lot of the guys that really were the backbone of the early 80s, the pre-pay-per-view years, and I'll just use it, one name, to me, when it comes to this show, one name kind of comes to mind, and that's the Magnificent Morocco, who was a big-time star from 80 to 84 in the pre-pay-per-view years. He was multi-time Intercontinental Champion, headlined many good house shows at Madison Square Garden. He's a good example of now as we get into the pay-per-view era and characters start to develop, he kind of gets lost in the shuffle. And he's not the only example. He's just the one that comes to.
Yeah, we've seen a few start to fade already, and there'll be more throughout the year. I mean, there's a few even on the show. So let's get into it. And of course, at the very beginning, we have the return of one of the greatest WrestleMania celebrities, and that's Bob Uecker.
Yes.
He joins the commentary booth, of course, as Jesse and Gorilla for the 4th straight year. And he helps commentate this opening match, which is a 20-man battle royal. So this is pretty much the 20 guys that were not involved in any of the title matches or tournament matches.
Right.
They threw them in here to get them on the show. So I'll read through the participants, and maybe we'll quickly hit. I think most of them have already been on a pay-per-view since we've started doing these reviews, so we don't have to get into too much background. But we have Ron Bass, the Killer Bees, Danny Davis, Bret Hart, Hillbilly Jim, Sam Houston, Junkyard Dog, Jim Neidhart, Ken Patera, your favorite boy, Jim Powers, King Harley Race, Paul Roma, the Fabulous Rougeau brothers, Sika, who was one of the Wild Samoans back in the early 80s, George Steele, my favorite, Nikolai Volkov, and Boris Zukov. Have we talked about? Yeah, we talked about Boris, I believe, at Survivor Series, right?
Yep.
So,
the only guy we haven't mentioned is the guy that actually won this Battle Royal.
Yes, Bad News
Makes
Brown.
his debut. And that is a guy by the name of Bad News Brown. And a very interesting character for 1988 standards. First off, he came from, I don't know where he's actually from. I mean, I guess he is from Harlem, New York. I think that's where he's actually from. I don't know if he's Canadian. He's not Canadian, right? Pretty sure he is actually from Harlem.
He may be. I'll check it out, but go ahead.
It's either that or he's from Florida. I don't think he's from Canada. But anyway, Bad News Brown. He's used other names. Bad News Allen.
Yeah, he's from New York.
Okay, so he's from Harlem. Bad News Alan Kogue. Alan Kogue is actually his real name. He actually trained in Stu's Dungeon, which I think a lot of people, once you actually watch Bad News Brown wrestle, you think you're pulling my leg. But no, it is true. He trained in the dungeon in Calgary. And he actually was a pretty good. He was pretty over up in Stampede for a while.
Yeah, and he had, Stu's. You can tell you Stu's background as far as the legit tough guy shoot fighting part of it goes. We don't see a lot of it in his WWF run, but he was known for it. And I believe he actually got into some shoot fighting. I remember watching an early mixed martial arts show. I think it was like our friend Jim who had one of the famous 90s black boxes growing up. So he used to watch some random crap that was on. And I remember he taped it. It was an early MMA show. I want to say it was like 94, 95, and Bad News Brown was actually on it, competing. It was a very, very boring show. They didn't do much, but definitely far cry from what UFC is today. So
yeah, exactly. Yeah, but he did. Yeah, he definitely. You could tell he was very stiff in the ring. But he just wasn't as technically sound as obviously Brett or Dynamite Kid or any of those guys were. He actually he had been wrestling in Japan for a while. I think before he went to Stampede, he actually recommended to the Dynamite Kid to go to Japan, and we obviously how that career went. He went to Florida from there, and actually, and once we have another future member of the Place to Be crew, Dr. G, he remembers Bad News Allen as he was down there back in the early to mid 80s down in Florida. He was actually Florida heavyweight champion. He actually had a pretty good feud with a very young and very green Lex Luger in Florida. And there's actually a very funny, it's actually on one of the Florida episodes that was on 24/7 a few years ago. This is one of our early comp tapes, probably late 05, early 06. There's an episode of Florida Wrestling where Gordon Soley and Bad News Brown or Bad News Allen were in this restaurant in Tampa or something, and there's like 50 friggin' wine glasses, and Gordon's got a cigarette hanging out of his mouth, and Bad News is pounding shots. It's like it's hilarious, and it's like a promo cutting while you're getting drunk. It's really funny. And they're putting over Luger, and that was the whole feud. But and then Vince brought him in here, so there's your background on Bad News Brown, and that's typical battle royal, nothing fancy. Uecker got out his good snarky lines, and
yeah, he was the most entertaining part, and of course that idiot George Steele just stands on the floor, and he doesn't really get involved, and I think he ends up eliminating Neidhart from the floor, and Jesse flips out, and this is actually Steele's last appearance, right? Until I don't know, does he ever pop up? I know he returns in like 1998. I don't know if he makes another pay-per-view, but
well, he was involved with the Oddities, but I don't think he was at a pay-per-view.
He might have popped up at like Rock Bottom or something.
Yeah, or even at like Fully Loaded 98 or some kind of nonsense like that. Or I don't think he was at SummerSlam 98.
No, it was after. He showed up like later in the year.
Oh, okay. No, this might be it for him. His final record is 0-1. His one match.
Yeah, pretty much.
2. And this, if you count this, 0-2. the end of this show is pretty much the way that Bad News Brown's career in the WWF would go. The last three guys in the ring were Bad News Brown, Bret the Hitman Hart, ironically, 2 Calgary guys, and actually 3 if you count the Junkyard Dog. 3 guys.
Another one.
3 Stampeders. And the 2 heels double team the babyface, and they throw JYD out.
I was going to say, that's a different slant on these. Usually, the face will duck and one of the heels will hit the other one, and then the last 2 guys will go at it. But yeah, this was a different little bit of a slant where they actually, were successful in teaming up and eliminating the face.
Yeah, and obviously for reasons we'll mention in a moment, Bret and Bad News high five and shake hands, and the crowd's booing, and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, Bad News hits what ends up being one of the swankest finishers that I've always liked. It was one of the first finishers I always liked when I was a wrestling fan, and that was, of course, the Ghetto Blaster, which is in essence, and we mentioned in our review, it's standing injury.
Yeah, it's not that great when you watch it nowadays.
It's pretty silly.
Yeah,
but,
it's basically a cartwheel by the guy's head, but it had a cool name.
Yeah, it did. It did, and then he pitches Bret out, and Bad News Brown wins the Battle Royal. Then Bret comes back in, a harbinger of what would happen 9 years later. He whined and broke the trophy.
Yes. The trophy was humongous too. It was pretty big.
Oh, the trophy was gigantic. That's what I said. That's where I mentioned this on a previous podcast, the one with that we had with Jordan, Duncan, and Andrew. My brother and I used to always mimic the Battle Royal and with our pillows and stuff when we were kids, and I would take my dad's bowling trophy, and of course he wouldn't let me break it, but it was kind of funny. But that trophy was pretty huge. But
this is also for Sam Houston and Sika too. They're done here.
Yeah, Sika I think was thrown in there just as an extra body and to give the an old school Vince Senior guy a payday.
Well, he was back. He was back on TV I think at this point.
Oh yeah, he was on a lot. 87.
Yeah, 87, 88. So
yeah, he was on weekly. I remember most of 87 on primetime and a lot of matches with like Ron Bass and those guys. In essence, the finish of this match is twofold. It's there to show off the new heel on the block and show off what his character's all about, which is I'm all about me, and that's screw you if you don't like it. But really, and I don't think anybody really thought about it now, but now obviously hindsight's 2020. Obviously this was the first hint of what would end up being a pretty successful Bret Hart solo career, and you knew that now looking back, Justin, and obviously again it's easy to say it now, but at the time you weren't watching it, and I really wasn't thinking about things like that back then when you're a wrestling fan. But the swerve of Bret being in the match obviously pushed his character ahead, and then obviously they were kind of teasing the face turn, and then eventually when we get to our next vault, the team actually got over. So Bret and
Bad News. You all right?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I brain farted for a minute. I had a thought in my head, and then it vanished. All
right, let's just move on. Bret Hart destroys the trophy.
Yeah, I don't know what happened. My head totally. I had a thought. It totally.
That's all right. It's all right. Let's move along.
Yeah,
so Bret Hart destroys the trophy, and it looks like they're starting to tease a face turn and possibly a singles run there. So.
Yeah, I had something much more eloquent in my head, and then it just totally vanished. So I'm sorry. But yeah, Bret Hart gets smashed the trophy. But again, the end of the match is twofold. In essence, it pushes Bad News Brown's character, this new guy, heel, screw you if you don't like the way I am, and obviously the very early seeds planted for the future solo career of Bret Hart. So
next up, Euchre leaves the booth, and now we move along to start the beginning of the tournament. And our first match features the man who really was the reason for this whole thing, and that's Ted DiBiase, facing off his old UWF buddy, Jim Duggan. So we got into both men's background already, so we can just move ahead with that. But one point of note here is Andre the Giant accompanies DiBiase down to ringside, which I know Gorilla made a big stink about, and Jesse does this great, explanation that Andre has a manager's license and all that crap. So it was good, and they did a great job here, really setting the tone for the importance of the tournament. That's what I really like that as well.
Well, Jesse's always been the best at that, and he's always been the best at putting something over as important. And he just says it. Maybe it's the tone of his voice or the way his candor. But I remember one time, I don't remember when in the show he says it, but he goes, you know what? But it's all about one thing: the tournament. It's just the way he said it. The gravity of it, the way he says it. That's just how great Jesse was. Did we do we did DiBiase's background, right?
Yeah.
Last year we did. Okay, so we don't have to go about it now. This is where we get into the and people say this is like a precursor to Vince Russo matches, but really they did have to make these matches kind of fast because
as it was. I mean, the show was 4 hours, so
yeah,
and that was with these Express Line matches, and this match here is only 5 minutes, and it was actually pretty good. This is one of Duggan's few matches in WWF where he broke out some like actual wrestling and didn't just brawl his way around through it. And it was actually a pretty entertaining match, and you could tell these guys had some chemistry back from their UWF days. And I like right away how they set the tone too, that Andre and Virgil are going to play a major role in DiBiase's run. They help distract Duggan and help DiBiase win. So DiBiase moves on pretty quickly. Duggan's gone, pretty much first round fodder, which you'd expect at this point. So
right, well, it's not like he needed to win the belt anyway. He was just there to put over a cheating heel. It's funny. I remember liking the little nuances of things like managers' licenses. Like the problem is the business, and again, this is another topic for another day. The business has gotten so smart now that you can't even say cool things like that anymore, like managers' licenses. That kind of stuff is what made stuff like that so great. It's kind of where the kayfabe era is missed. But Duggan's just here to put over DiBiase as a cheating.
Yep, so DiBiase moves on to round 2, and then we move on to our second tournament match, and that is Don Morocco, a man you mentioned earlier, facing off with Dino Bravo, who we talked a lot about at the Rumble now, how he's, out of the Dream Team, moved on to being more of a Canadian hero kind of character, with that useless clown Frenchie Martin in his corner.
See, you guys bust my stones about how much I hate Duggan, but you know what? I like how guys get your go. Although yours is more manager.
I'd say at least Duggan was useful in the ring. I mean, Frenchie Martin was just awful. He just stood out there and waved a stupid flag with his dumbass monocle and fucking fat asses hobbled around the ring. It was just useless. I couldn't stand
the worst part about it is I agree with you, because the worst part of that was he was actually still wrestling in 1987, and he was wrestling Outback Jack for about 12 straight. Friggin'
well, he's on like some house show.
He's
on some house show in like 1990. He shows up on like some MSG house show or something.
That's funny.
This is weird. Yeah, he nothing special. It's kind of like this match. Which show obviously they didn't want Bravo to job, but they needed faces to move along. So we see Morocco. Bravo pulls the referee in front of Morocco as he comes, flying in with a clothesline. Or a forearm or something, and then Bravo hits a suplex and pins Morocco. He thinks he wins, but the ref actually ends up disqualifying Bravo. So Morocco moves on. Bravo doesn't have to lay down, and that's pretty much it for here.
Yeah, the only difference here is if this was 2009 and we were doing the wellness policy, then both these guys would have been disqualified because
Morocco's ridiculous at this point.
Yeah, no, Morocco, I don't think his skin would just be peeling right now.
You know what? Actually, too, Billy Graham, who was in his corner, is pretty ridiculous looking at the show as well. So
there's no doubt that the drugs he was taking to heal his hip were certainly not what he was taking at this point, because the two of them just looked like like they were just completely falling out of their skin, and Bravo never looked. I mean, I'm sure he took them. But, Bravo never looked as sickly jacked.
No, yeah, he was just more, like, really thick, than, he didn't really have, like, those huge peaks like a lot of those guys did. But
yeah, and he didn't have veins sticking out, and his skin wasn't all, like, paper thin. Yeah, it was sick. It was very sick. But, the match is just two lumbering guys bumbling around, and Morocco moves on, because like you said, I agree with you. They needed some babyface to win something. So
all right. So our next match is another man who was part of the Dream Team and is kind of trying to reestablish himself as a singles player, and that's Greg Valentine, matching up with Ricky Steamboat, who in a 1-year span has really completely fallen off the map by this point. And the way the brackets go, you were kind of thinking, maybe we'll get a Savage Steamboat rematch in the second round. But it just wasn't meant to be. Obviously, Steamboat still kind of being in the doghouse after that whole mess with his wife being pregnant. And also, I think, I don't think they wanted Savage to have any kind of crowd split, and a match with Steamboat probably would have split the crowd. And they probably didn't want him working, a crazy match like that either, with all the wrestling he had to do that night. So
right. And
of course, Steamboat does come out with his son dressed like a dragon. So pretty much the reason possibly for this whole tournament, really, when you go back to the story. So he comes out here with him, and it's just kind of his farewell for the next few years.
Yeah, and it's funny because this match like 2 years ago would have been really good.
Yeah.
If this was like 1986.
Yeah, and it was good here. I mean, they only got 9 minutes, but it was actually one of the better matches of the tournament.
Yeah, that's probably why they got more time than some of the others.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a shame. I wonder what things might have been different. Steamboat might have been the guy that replaced, Savage, and Steamboat would have been the face holding the title while Hogan was away. If that ended up being the case, you never know. Yeah, I mean, it's a great match, but it's you won't see Ricky in a WWF ring till 1991.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, you know what things. And it's sad because he ends up getting screwed in WCW too, but I mean, we'll get more to that when he comes back in 1991.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's a great match, and Valentine's is just a good worker. And he'll always be just known as a good, solid worker.
Yeah, just a professional guy, knows his job and gets it done.
Exactly, and it's great back then when we didn't worry about durations or segment match times, when Gorilla would take a 9-minute match and say that wow, it's been 20 minutes, and Great Valentine's just those were the two things that Gorilla loved to lean on for about 4 years was Dino Bravo cheating in the weightlifting, and the fact that it took 20 minutes for Greg Valentine to get warmed up in a match.
Yes.
I think he used that in every house show. I think he said that every time.
I think he said it here in the first round. I remember because I think there was a time limit on these matches, and he goes, "Well, it takes Valentine 20 minutes to get going," So, that was always the joke between them.
Yeah,
okay.
Valentine moves on here, and poor Ricky the Dragon gets jobbed out, which is a shame, but unfortunately, when you're on the list, you're on the list. So.
All right, so our next match is the man we just mentioned. That's Macho Man Randy Savage facing Butch Reed, the Natural. This is Reed's final appearance, final record 1-3. He'd go to the NWA after this and team up with Ron Simmons, obviously to be part of the Mass Tag Team Doom, one of the most famous NWA tag teams. So we already got into the whole background in our last review. Survivor Series and our last review with Savage and Honky Tonk Man, the feud they had, which turned Savage face. So here he comes out with Elizabeth, and I actually liked the whole, Gorilla and Jesse spent most of this first match arguing whether or not Elizabeth was a viable manager, someone that could lead someone to a title, and, Jesse arguing that maybe he'd rather have Slick than Elizabeth in his corner, and it was good stuff. But in the end, Gorilla ended up being proven right, because Elizabeth kind of flirted with Butch Reed as he was climbing the rope, and Savage threw him off the top, hit the elbow, and advanced.
Right. And it really pisses you off because... Butch Reed, as we talked about in the WrestleMania or in the Survivor Series 87 podcast, that it was Butch Reed's fault that we have this whole honky tonk disaster, and then he ends up leaving anyway. So I think Vince was punishing him by probably trying to underpay him or whatever, and he left anyway. But one thing I have to say, and I'll elaborate more on this when we get to the end of the tournament. I really like the choice of guys that they made Savage go through.
Yes,
big, thick dudes. And I mean, true, this match is only a little over 4 minutes, but still, I mean, he wasn't wrestling, stiffs. It wasn't like he was wrestling Danny Davis.
And as always, they have him get the shit kicked out of him throughout the whole match. I mean, this match was pretty much, 3.5 minutes of Butch Reed pounding on him, and then he gets the win.
Yeah, exactly. So, and that's pretty much how every match is. But he picked all good, big, thick dudes that could just bludgeon you to death, and then Savage snuck away with a win. And in this case, in fact, this is the only match until we get to the finals that he actually uses the elbow. But yes, Elizabeth does her little feminine wiles, and we'll see her really use her feminine wiles at the next vault. But Butch Reed, just like Steamboat, jobs out into the sunset. So. Yep.
So now we move on. We have 2 more matches here in the first round before we wrap up. The next one is One Man Gang taking on Bam Bam Bigelow. This is actually also Bigelow's final match until 1993. This is a guy that seemingly had a lot of promise when we first met him at the 87 Survivor Series, but it seemed like injury and an attitude kind of derailed him quickly, and shortly after this he would leave and move on to a quick run in NWA and then Japan before returning. Gang, obviously still going strong, gets the win here by countout. Actually, the end of this is kind of confusing too. Bigelow's like on the apron, kind of getting in the ring, and the ref counts him out, and him and Humperdick stand all confused, and it was just kind of just weird. I don't get why they didn't have Gang just pin him so he'd look strong, knowing that Bigelow was leaving anyway. Just kind of an odd choice.
Well, I find it. I never really thought about this before, and the fact that I've known you now for almost 8 years, that had they did the character change that he would eventually have just 1 year earlier, and this could have been Akeem versus Bam Bam Bigelow, and then what the hell would you have done?
I don't know. My head probably would have exploded.
Yeah, I didn't understand this either. I don't know where this came from, but yeah, they made the whole thing look really kind of strange, and one man gang won. But I agree with you. If Bigelow was leaving anyway, and you'd think that the gang would just beat him strong and move on. And the match is only 3 minutes, and again, Bigelow will be gone for almost 6 years. But 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, nothing much here. This pretty much the best thing. One thing they did here, besides help out the characters that would advance, is they pretty much took everybody that was leaving or was on the shit list and pretty much jobbed them all out. So it was a multi-purpose tournament.
Yeah, it kind of worked out well for them that they had this cachet of guys that were pretty much on their last legs that could easily eat pins and job out. So
yeah. So
all right. So in our final first round match was actually probably one of the more anticipated matches as far as like. Quality of match goes. And actually, this is one I always kind of have an internal war with myself over. And that's Rick Rude against Jake Roberts. And, I watch it one time and I like it, and the next time I'm bored by it. It's just a very weird match. It has a lot of psychology behind it, where Rude basically spends the whole match escaping and countering the DDT, and Gorilla and Jesse, talk about how Heenan's really been training Rude on ways to reverse it and avoid it. And they really got the story over nicely. But the problem is you could tell they were trying to fill time because this match ends up ending in a draw. So you could tell they were just trying to fill that 15 minutes as it moved along. They had a lot of chin locks and headlocks. So the psychology was good for part of it, but then part of it you could tell was a lot of stalling. And I actually kind of wish they just did like a double count out in less time, instead of going that obvious 15-minute route.
Well, what's upsetting here is that these two guys obviously deserve to be in the tournament, but this was the only first-round match that actually had a legitimate feud going on. I mean, Rude was making time with
No, I don't think that started yet. I think that was after this.
I thought it was just starting before this. Maybe not.
Yeah, no, I think it was over the summer. I don't think
Was
they
it
were
really
really.
the summer?
Yeah, I don't think they were really feuding yet at this point. They don't mention it at all. They just act like this is just a tournament match.
Oh, you know what? I'm sorry. I'm I'm just perusing my notes right now, and I even say to my comments that it starts over the summer. Okay, so at least you had two guys who good storytellers.
Well. Yeah,
and it's a great matchup. Two good storytellers, and I mean, if you weren't gonna have a concrete ending to this match, why take 15 minutes? And obviously, if you actually time the tape, it's 15 seconds past 15 minutes, which makes it more bizarre. And
the show was bloated and long as it was, so it's just kind of odd. Like, they didn't. I mean, the only thing I can think of is that they wanted to establish that this kind of thing could happen. That's the only thing I can think of.
Exactly, and we'd see future draws in tournaments. I think they realized they probably started to establish this feud after this show. Thinking, these guys got some decent chemistry. Let's think of something. And obviously, as we both say, Rude starts to mess with Jake's wife Cheryl shortly after this. You'd think they would have laid things out a little bit better and done something different with this match. And once we reopen the vault and get to SummerSlam, it'll really be frustrating because when we get to SummerSlam and the feud is really red hot, and then when we get there, we'll tell you what happens, or it doesn't happen, I guess. But I mean, you obviously have two guys who are very experienced and would have put on a really good match, but I'm like, I'm kind of like you in this one. 1 minute you're like, this is good, then the next minute you're like, I don't know, there's a lot of screwing around in the middle, and this is a weird match that you kind of you're not sure how you want to word it. We both end up giving it a 2.5 on our written review.
And now, of course, because of that draw, Gang gets a bye to the semifinals now.
Yeah, of all the guys, Well,
it made sense, I think.
Well, it made sense once we get to why it makes sense. But he moves on. So the two best guys, workers, at least, next to Savage and Steamboat, a couple other guys in the tournament, and they end up vanishing. So.
Yep. So now the tournament takes a break, and we get a non-tournament match, and that is the Ultimate Warrior battling Hercules. These two were feuding. Back in January, they were kind of squaring off in the ring, set to have a match, but before it, they started both tugging on Hercules' chain, kind of doing like a tug of war, and they snapped it in half. Pretty cool visual. Hercules ended up getting DQ'd in that match because he started beating on Warrior with the remaining chain piece. So it was a pretty good build-up, and this was just a chance to give Warrior a win on pay-per-view. But in another weird finish, They kind of do that like awkward back suplex where he kind of bridges and then one guy rolls the shoulder up and the other one doesn't, and it's just always a confusing finish. That's actually 2 years in a row Hercules would be involved in a similar finish. Same thing at 5, so kind of odd. So Warrior gets the win with that suplex. I don't know why they didn't just have him pin him with the big splash or the press slam to really put him over strong. It's the odd
Well,
decision.
actually, and if you count the Billy Jack weird count out thing, it's 3 years in a row.
Well, I just meant it was 2 years in a row is the same exact finish.
Oh, I see
at
what you're
5
saying.
he does the bridge and only Hercules is the one that gets the shoulder up at 5. So
Right. Oh, I see what you're saying.
it's kind of odd. So, but Warrior would feud with Hercules is part of the Heenan family here. So Warrior kind of feuds with the Heenan family throughout the rest of the year. Actually, for a while, for the next couple of years, really, kind of feuds with
really.
him. So
He does rotate. He does kind of rotate everybody. Well, him and Hogan, they ended up being the two biggest baby faces eventually, and you always got to go through Bobby's family. So, yeah, I mean, it was a short match. Both guys are not, their moveset's incredibly limited, so you didn't want to give them too much time to make asses of themselves. So, and you have to think as you move ahead through history, this is probably the Ultimate Warrior's worst match at WrestleMania.
yeah, and it's mainly because it's short, and his opponent. But it's actually, I don't know. I mean, you know me. I'm a big mark for powerhouse wrestling. So
I am as well.
yeah, I enjoyed this one. It wasn't bad. I mean, for what it was, if they went 12 minutes with bear hugs and shit, I probably would have lost interest. But
Right.
for what it was, a 4-minute stiff fest, I enjoyed it.
No, I did too, and they did, and Warrior whipping the chain around, and it's a pretty good visual. But yeah, as a match, it's not much.
I also liked Warrior's paint and tights of the show. This is the one where he had the powder blue and the white. I thought it was pretty cool.
Yes, I agree. I just that vision just popped in my head of the powder blue face paint. Yeah, I enjoyed that too.
I wish he wore that more often, but I guess I guess it did have more of a mid card look to it. But okay, so with that match out of the way, now we resume with the tournament, and the quarterfinals begin with two guys who had gotten a bye through the first round, as we discussed on our last Vault review. These two guys were given a bye because they were the previous two champions, and that's Hulk Hogan and Andre the Giant. So 1 year later now, from WrestleMania 3, they get their rematch. Well, I guess really the rubber match because they did fight at the main event. Unfortunately, without the atmosphere and the build, this match is not nearly as good as the one at WrestleMania 3.
No, this match is painfully terrible.
And it's only 5 minutes, and it's pretty boring.
Yeah. And I guess the legendary, and you mentioned it I don't remember which one, but you mentioned it on a past podcast. I don't remember it because I didn't ever own the tape, and I don't remember actually watching this on the.
Well, it's from renting it. I didn't own it. It was I'd rented a lot.
Yeah, see, I don't remember renting this one, so I don't actually remember. I probably did, just didn't remember. But the memorable thing about this match is that if you rented this pay-per-view, it came in 2 tapes, and you would think, a natural break between 2 matches would, but no, the tape stops in the middle of this match.
Yeah, he's got him like in a bear hug, and then it just like fades out, and it's like continue on tape 2. I always loved renting that and just getting that big box with the 2 tapes in it. That was pretty cool.
Yeah. But like you said, the first 2 times these two met, both had huge, incredible builds. Obviously, the WrestleMania 3 one, speaks for itself. But even the main event match had just an incredible build. This just doesn't. It doesn't need the build. It's set. It's the rubber match, but it's not a title match.
Right.
It's something to. It sort of is. I mean, from an abstract viewpoint, but it's not. It's not. It's not the finals.
And when you really look at it, too, the heavy implications of having them fight in the second round, knowing that one of these guys was going to be eliminated and not make it, to the end.
Right. It takes away from it. So for the first time, you actually had to watch them just in a standalone match, and it's just hideous. It's 1 year later now, and it is more than evident that Andre just can't do it anymore. His body is slow. It's breaking down. I mean, it's tough to watch. There's just no doubt.
It's weird too because I thought they were using him well as DiBiase's bodyguard, and I think they should have left it that way probably for a while. I mean, I get why he had to be in this tournament, but I think as the year went on, he should have just kind of stayed more in that role instead of wrestling.
Yeah, and I mean, maybe just Vince thought he still had a little bankable value, and he did. I mean, it's Andre, but legitimately, he just should not have been in the ring anymore. I mean, it was just his body was just getting creaky, and the jiggin, I never knew how to say it right, for God's sakes, gigantitis or whatever the heck it's called, the big man's disease, really was starting to ratchet him. I'm sure his back was still, he had back surgery, but I'm still, the guy is a huge figure, and he was in his 40s by then, late 40s. So,
no, he wasn't that old, was he? I thought when he passed away, he was only like 46.
No, I think he was in his 50s by then.
No.
Let's take a look.
I'm gonna
He
look
just,
right now.
well, if not, then he just looked really old.
Yeah. No, he passed away at 46.
Wow. So he was, and that was 5. So he was like only 41. Wow.
Yeah, 41.
That's devastating then, because he looked like he was in his 50s at this point.
No, he wasn't.
Yeah,
46.
it's just, his body was just falling apart, and Hogan's not a guy that's going to carry anybody. So
No.
so as a standalone match, it's a complete mess. But
actually, I hate the ending too, because Hogan actually hits Andre first, and the ref's looking right at him, and then Andre takes the chair and hits Hogan, and they end up both getting disqualified. It was probably just badly done, but I don't know, kind of pissed me off. Like, I think Hogan should have been DQ'd because he hit Andre clearly first with the chair.
right, I don't know. I usually when you see a match that needs a double DQ, usually it's two guys like just attacking the ref, throwing him around, and the ref just gets pissed off and tells him and just disqualifies both of them. Now I could see that. That probably would have been a more logical ending.
Well, actually, too, though, I thought there was good psychology with this because, they reveal later the winner of this was supposed to fight the winner of DiBiase Morocco, and Jesse really pushes the agenda that DiBiase was just trying to get Hogan out of the tournament. That was Andre's job, not to win the match, but to get Hogan out of the tournament. So he successfully, gets him out of the tournament. So that was a pretty big thing for DiBiase, obviously, and I like the way that they incorporated that psychology into the match.
Yeah, no, the what they were looking for was correct, but like you said, getting there was it didn't look good on TV. It was just a strange way to end it. They should have just had like like Andre should have, I don't know, thrown the ref, or they should have done something where Hogan gets caught doing something.
Yeah, they could have done something better.
But yeah, I mean, I was pretty shocked. I mean, it was a shocking thing. I mean,
well, I mean, you knew going in that one of these guys was going to get out at this round, but to have both of them eliminated, that was a pretty big surprise, and that pretty much left, only two favorites going forward, two guys that you thought could win it. But I'll just read this line straight from the review because I don't think I could explain it any better. After the match, noted sore loser Hogan kicks the shit out of Virgil with a suplex in the aisle, slams Andre, and then poses for 25 minutes in the middle of the show. So I guess they wanted the fans to get their Hogan fix, but it just kind of really ends up killing the momentum of the show.
Yeah, on top of the fact that at this point, the show is probably about 2 hours. We're probably at about the 2 hour mark at this point. So
yeah, I think the fans just wanted to get going. I'm sure they wanted to get their Hogan, but I don't think he really does pose for a while out there. It's like, I always fast forward it when I watch it.
Yeah, and you think to yourself, obviously, is this really the last we're going to see of him tonight? I mean, obviously, we'll get to the end, but you even think to yourself, this is it? I'm actually going to watch the end of a pay-per-view from the late 80s and Hogan's not going to be in the end?
Yeah.
Like, you just didn't think of it. It didn't fathom in your head.
Now, this is two straight, really. I mean, not counting the Rumble, but, Survivor Series, he loses. Yeah, he comes out and poses after. But now this is two straight pay-per-views where all of a sudden Hogan's, on the shit end of the stick.
Yeah, and you wonder why, and you wonder, not many people know about the movie or anything, so you're like, whoa, what's going on here? Mm-hmm. Is Hogan in a slump, or what's going on? Is he hurt? I mean, it was mind-boggling. But you know what? For the suspense factor, that's exactly what the show needed. So it was smart in that aspect to get these two guys out because it does add a lot of intrigue for the rest of the show. I think at this point, a lot of people maybe thought DiBiase was going to win because pretty much the build going into this tournament was pretty much all about him.
Right.
And so obviously, as you introduce the next match, we kind of think that's where we're headed.
Yes, and with that next match is DiBiase and Morocco. Round 2 match. Both guys had won the first match. Now, DiBiase without Andre, who was cooling down, and also without Virgil. So he's by himself here because Virgil was beat up by Hogan after the last match. So DiBiase goes at it on his own. Another, solid match, which many of these tournament matches were. None of them were. This is the difference between this one and the more famous Russo tournament that we'll get to later. in our reviews, where those matches were quick and not very solid.
No, they were terrible.
These here are all at least, like, we have them all at like 1.5 to 2.5 stars, so they're all decent matches. And they have a pretty crisp pace to them as well. So, I liked watching DiBiase bump around as Morocco threw him around the ring. And I really like the finish. DiBiase snaps him with a really nice stun gun across the top rope.
I love that. I love that finish. Yeah, I agree. I love that finish. And mind you, 5.5 minutes is not a ridiculously short match. It's a decent-sized match.
Yeah.
I mean, 1998, we're talking about 45 seconds of crap. It's like totally different things. Yeah, but yeah, DiBiase really is a great seller, and that's one of his best attributes. I think he should be teaching that to guys now. He hits a pretty good stun gun. DiBiase didn't seem like a strong guy, but Morocco was 280 of thick juice and God knows what else. So it was a pretty effective finisher. I like too how they
how these matches all had like different, like each guy won with different finishes every time. You know what I mean? So
right.
They didn't keep using their finisher. I like how they had to find ways to win all these matches. I thought that was well done too.
Yes, and this also was a big turning point of this show, because now you're thinking, well, we have DiBiase doesn't have any of his guys, and he actually won this match clean. So you really were starting to think that DiBiase was going to worm his way into winning the World Championship. So booked here in that aspect too.
And with this win, he gets a bye to the finals.
Right.
Yeah, because Hogan and Andre are out. So,
which Jesse, of course, was pretty psyched about, and really, the guy's just a psychology master, and he was just really getting into your head. Oh my God, DiBiase is probably going to win this tournament, and now you know why. It was a great motivator and a great, push of character, and the fact that I just can't get over the fact that he won the match clean without any help, and now you're really thinking, wow, he can win with help, he can win without help.
Right.
He's on his way to winning this thing.
Yep. So with that, we'll wrap up the second round, and that is Randy Savage coming back to face Greg Valentine, the match that many people thought would maybe be Steamboat Savage. But you know what? For what this was, 6 minutes, it was actually really good. This may have been the best tournament match overall. I guess the finals is good too, but this one was solid. I always like this one. It's pretty much, again, Valentine just destroying Savage for 6 minutes, and then goes to the figure four, and Savage rolls him up with a small package and steals another win. They were giving Savage some stiff competition here, like we mentioned, and again, he pretty much just takes a beating the whole time and sneaks out at the end.
Yep, and again, you're dealing with a guy who was thick and was not pulling back any of his punches. He's always wrestled pretty stiff, and Savage was a pretty good seller, and squeezed this game out of his butt and moved on. But he was taking some pretty good shit kickings, and in the 10 minutes in the ring, and he's looking more and more winded and sweatier, and and I think the great part of the whole thing was he had different tights every match too, which I always thought was pretty slick. It was pretty neat.
And I do like how they had One Man Gang come out before the match and just walk to the ring so they could announce that he had a bye. That was pretty entertaining.
Yeah, I know. He should have he should have smacked Savage on the way in. That would have made it even better. But it was you're still feeling that that DiBiase is probably going to win, but you're like, oh, Savage, 2 wins, pretty impressive so far. But I don't think at this point. See, I didn't see did I see the show live? I don't even remember if I saw it live. I think I did. But I do remember thinking, even watching the tape sometime later, that I don't remember thinking anybody was going to win this other than DiBiase. It just seemed like the thing was tailor-made for him to win, because no other baby faces you felt had the juice to be a world champion.
And they were setting it up nicely, having, Savage, they were making like he was going to be pretty worn down, having to fight all these matches, and now DiBiase, has the bye, so he moves right into the final. So it was well booked that way too. This is really actually a perfectly booked tournament. I mean, when you break it down.
Yeah, absolutely. And getting from getting rid of guys that were leaving to character development. It was. You wish that they could be this organized now about something this detailed and this detail oriented that you can't really blow. They did a good job. They really did.
All right. So with that, now the second round is over. So now we move on. We have back-to-back non-tournament matches here before we get back into things. First one is our first title match, and that is for the Intercontinental title. Brutus Beefcake challenging the Honky Tonk Man. Of course, Beefcake turned face at WrestleMania 3, adopted the barber gimmick. These two would war for a while. They started in the fall, and it would go pretty much through the summer, I think they feuded for a while. So they had the whole thing where, I don't remember she came out with Honky here, Peggy Sue, but I know they had that going on during this time period. They did the house show matches where Beefcake would have, his woman, I think it was Georgina was her name, was George Steele dressed as a woman in his corner, and Honky had Peggy Sue. And on one time, it's a pretty famous match. It was at a house show, but it's on a couple of compilation tapes where Jimmy Hart was Peggy Sue for that one, and they strip him down and all that stuff. So, but of course Sherry Martel was playing Peggy Sue usually.
Right.
So Honky defends his title here. I thought Beefcake was actually going to win the title here. It seemed like they were building that way, but I'm okay with the ending here. As much as I don't care for DQs, it was Honky's gimmick to sneak away with the title. And also, you don't want to have Beefcake win, have a big title change. Honky had a pretty good title reign, and to have it end here buried on the 16-match card in the middle, with so much other stuff going on, it just, seems like it would have been a waste.
Yeah, I get into those. This is one of my rant moments because I was just so honkied out that I just, I wanted something to happen. I was actually, this is one of the, and I have nothing against Brutus at all, never did, but this is one of the times where I really was just wanting him to win the title and just end this. Mm-hmm. And because I just couldn't stand watching him anymore. I mean, his matches are terrible, but yeah, I'm trying to, now looking back, logically, you wouldn't want to see a big-time title change buried in the middle of a show by this point where everybody's hitting, 3 hours long almost. So
yeah, it just doesn't make sense. I mean, if it wasn't a reign as great as Honky's had been, and when I say great, I mean, just how long and he had been sneaking it, you really wanted to see this dude lose. To bury it here just seemed like it would have been a waste of all the build they had given it.
Right.
And of course, after the match, Beefcake grabs hold of Jimmy Hart and cuts his hair a little bit to get his heat. So
right, yeah. So it wasn't a bad match. I was really rooting for Beefcake here. I would like to see the Beefer win the Intercontinental title, but as much as he gets the win over, typical Honky, gets the loser's purse as Gorilla and Jesse would say, mm-hmm. But got to keep his title. So kept the gimmick going.
So our next match is another non-tournament match, and this is a match that had a pretty good build-up behind it. It's a 6-man tag. The Islanders teaming up with Bobby Heenan against British Bulldogs and Coco Beware. Of course, the Islanders had stolen the Bulldogs mascot Matilda back in December. They had all the fans sending in the cards to get well Matilda, come back Matilda cards. After a lot of investigations and all this other stuff by Jack Tunney, he threatened to suspend the Islanders, and they ended up returning Matilda. So the joke here, of course, is that Bobby Heenan's wearing the dog catcher's outfit. So, because the Bulldogs had promised that Matilda was going to attack him. So he has this ridiculous coat on with all the zippers and buttons on it. And, just classic Heenan stuff. So it was pretty good.
Yeah. It's, I'm trying to remember, is it on the manager? I think it's on the manager's DVD. I don't know if it's on Bobby's DVD that just came out recently. I don't have Bobby's DVD, but I think it's on the manager's DVD to put over Bobby's character, obviously, on that. But yeah, this was a comedy match. Although I tell you something, the Islanders were a pretty legit team, and mm-hmm. I thought they were due for a tag title run at some point. I always love watching them wrestle. Yep. Obviously, who's not a Haku fan, really?
Well, this was it for them, though, as far as pay-per-views go, because they're not at SummerSlam, and by the end of the year, Survivor Series, Haku's by himself. So,
right.
Yeah, this is it as far as their tag team run goes, which is sad because they really have been both as faces and heels a solid team.
Yes, exactly, and the Bulldogs were really on their last legs at this point, and mm-hmm. They weren't going to eat the pin. That's why Coco was there. Sorry.
Yeah, pretty much. That's fine. He's just happy to be on pay-per-view.
Yeah, he's happy to get a check. That's what most of these guys are happy to get a check. They don't care whether they win or lose. But yeah, this is all pretty much for fodder for Bobby to be entertaining, and that's why I gave this match probably a little higher grade. I gave it a 3, probably being generous, but maybe it's just because I was a big Islander fan, and I did who doesn't love Bobby? So I think the entertainment value kind of makes me think more fondly of this show of this match than it probably is.
And that was a fun match. And after the match, it's great. Bobby goes sprinting down the aisles. Matilda chases him and catches him and starts biting on the jacket and everything. So Yeah, it was pretty funny. So, all right, that's it for that. So that brings it into their feud. Bulldogs get Matilda back. They lose the match, but they get to see her gnaw on Bobby a little bit. So now we're back to the tournament. DiBiase comes out, waves, whatever. They announce the bye. So now we have Savage in the semifinals against One Man Gang, who was fresh off his bye. So I really liked how they stacked the deck against Savage here. He had two quality opponents, got the shit kicked out of him both times, and now he gets a fresh One Man Gang guy, twice his size. That was all perfect. The execution, I just didn't get. I don't get why Gang couldn't job.
I know, yeah.
And I kind of go off in our review a little bit about it. I just don't get it. I mean, this Savage was a guy obviously primed for a big main event run. You're telling me Gang could not just lay down and let him get another win? It's just a stupid ending. I mean, Gang has the cane. He's trying to hit Savage. Savage rolling around, and the ref calls for the bell. It just wasn't even a good DQ. They should at least had Gang crack him with a chair or something to at least build even more heat for Savage if they were going to do something like this.
Right.
It's just an odd match.
Yeah, I didn't understand it either. I mean, I knew One Man Gang's character was over, but I don't know what they were anticipating because by the end of the year they changed it anyway. So I don't,
it wasn't even that long after this that he disappeared and came back. I think it was in the early fall, late summer. So I mean, it just didn't. Yeah, it was just I don't know. I don't get it.
Yeah, I mean, he might have just have already he in mid match maybe if he had found Deepest Darkest Africa in midway through this match and became Hakeem, obviously you would have had him win the tournament. But yeah, it's just really strange. Him, and it just looked foolish. Him continuously hitting the canvas with the cane and hitting it again and hitting it again.
I get maybe they didn't want Savage to look. I mean, in a weird way, didn't want him to look strong going to the main event. Because they kind of made him look like fluky wins the whole way through. Right. I think they wanted to really have it be, a big question going into the final. So I get that, but I just wish they had made it a more decisive DQ if they were going to do a DQ. It was just dumb.
Right, and at this point for me, now you start thinking, well, I don't know. Now your final is set. I don't know.
Well, you get the fresh guy in DiBiase though, against the guy who had
and they took so much right, and they took so much time throughout really the first 3 months of 1988 putting this guy over as somebody who will do anything to be world champion. And Savage was, I don't want to say Savage was an afterthought, but he was, as this whole thing with Savage, with DiBiase and Hogan and Andre was going on, Savage was doing something completely different.
Yes.
So you weren't even thinking about him at this point. So it was, it was fascinating. Now you're down to the point where Savage was, they'll make him look good. Maybe Hogan will come in and get a DQ and Savage will stay a heel, or you don't know what was going on. But it was, it was an interesting setup in the final. But some of these matches, the storyline telling was good, and you can understand in their heads they thought it looked right, but then execution just looked really, really bad.
And now before we get to the main event, we do have one more match, and that is a title match featuring our favorite tag team, right? Best tag team of all time, Demolition.
Well, hey, I had to say that to their face, so because I thought they were going to kill me. But
and as they take on these guys who are the current tag team champions, of course, one of the greatest theme songs of all time. And that is Strike Force. They had won the titles back in '87, and walk in here, good champions, but it was obvious that the crowd wanted to cheer for Demolition. They wanted to see Demolition destroy the Pretty Boy Strike Force for the titles, and the crowd was on Strike Force from the start and behind Demolition from the start. And they got a huge pop when they won the titles here.
Yeah, and it's funny because you're not at that level. Obviously, the Road Warriors were in NWA at the time, but you didn't think the WWF crowd would still root for a team like Demolition. You know, Strike Force was still the prototypical babyface 80s tag team. Two good-looking guys, with their little white tights and their little belts and, singing their little song and the chicks around the car. And, the video for the song is hideous, but the song is actually pretty good. But yeah, the crowd just wanted Axe and Smash, just pummel these bums, and nothing against, it's nothing on poor Tito, but Demolition was set to explode. I mean, they were the team, and they showed it here. I mean, I wouldn't say it was a one-sided match. I mean, Strikeforce got some shots in, but pretty much it was Demolition. It was almost booked like a Road Warriors match, except longer.
Right.
Demolition pretty much beat the shit out of them, and then
they use Fuji's cane and get the win. And actually, I guess we'll talk about this here because we won't really get a chance for a while, but they would have a rematch in July on primetime.
Right.
And Strikeforce would get counted out because the Demolition would hit a decapitation elbow on Martel on the floor. And that would, give him a neck injury that would keep him on the shelf for 8 months. Now, I'm pretty sure it was a kayfabe injury, but I don't know if he had a real injury that kept him out, or if he just wanted time off, or they were just doing it for the story. I'm not sure.
I believe he was legitimately hurt. I believe he actually.
It wasn't
was
from this move, though, right?
No, I don't
that
think
was just
so.
his explanation.
Yeah. I think he was due for some rehab.
Actually, no, we were wrong. In reality, Martel took an extended leave of absence to help take care of his wife, who was severely ill. So that's why they had to get him off TV there. So.
All right. Well, you know what? They fooled me. Good job on kayfabe.
Yeah, it was a good angle.
I thought he was legitimately hurt, but
so Tito would kind of do things on his own for the rest of '88 after July. So, but that's it. We have the new kings of the tag team mountain, and they would really be the standard bearers for the next 2 years.
And incidentally, before you keep giving me crap, I actually have no problem with Demolition. In fact, I thought Demolition and the Road Warriors should have been the final at that tournament, and the Silly Heart Foundation should have just stayed away.
Get out of here.
But we're not talking about Demolition. But this is a big match for them, and they are the face of the. They really are almost the face of the company, or at least the face of the tag team division.
Yes.
For the next.
Yeah, it's pretty much the next 2
years.
years is their peak. I mean, they have a crazy run here from here through WrestleMania 6.
Yep.
Is really just a great 2-year run for them.
Yeah, and they're just as over as Hogan and any other baby faces. Really, I mean, they're crazy over.
Yeah, I mean, for any fans of the WWF that weren't really cognizant of the NWA, similar to myself, who started watching in early '90, I caught the tail end of Demolition, but I caught up through tape watching, and they were really the it team for a lot of us fans that weren't, really privy to who or what the Road Warriors were. So. To us, Demolition was the badass dominant team.
Yeah, I was, and I've said this in past podcasts, so this is not new to anybody, but I was a big Demolition fan. See, unlike some other of our friends and other fans who think the Demolition are Road Warrior posers, see, I disagree. I think they're two totally different teams. I always thought the Powers of Pain were the Road Warrior posers, because they look more like the Road Warriors than I thought Demolition did. So, to me, Demolition, I mean, I'm sure Vince used the Road Warriors template to create Demolition, but to me, Demolition looked and wrestled nothing like Road Warriors. I mean, I honestly think at times Demolition might have had a little bit better work rate as a tag team than the Road Warriors.
Without a doubt, I think so.
But yeah, I've never said that Hawk and Animal were Steamboat and Flair. They were just two awesome guys who beat the shit out of everybody, and I loved it. I mean,
I mean, as we've talked about on the board ad nauseum at this point. My contention is that the Road Warriors were built through booking, and that is what made them such a great team. I argue that the Heart Foundation is actually a superior tag team based on, in-ring ability, storytelling ability, and just actually being a better team. I just think if you gave any team the Road Warriors push, they would have been a monster tag team as well.
I don't disagree with you. However, I'm just going to say this. PWI, Stu Sachs and Napolitano, what's his name? What's his face?
Bill Apter.
Bill Apter and all those guys, big work rate junkies. They're like the 80s version of Scott Keith. They all love work rate, and they all love. Meanwhile, they gave the Road Warriors the tag team of the year like 6 times. So I think
come on. I mean, if you're relying on the PWI awards to back your argument, I think you lose just based on that.
What? It's
a kayfabe magazine that's giving awards because the Road Warriors are the most popular team. Go look at some of the other freaking awards they've given out over the years, and then you come back and defend.
Right, but mind you, they also gave match of the years to really legitimately good matches. I mean, I think they did give a crappy match of the year one year, but
I mean, their awards were always all over the place. I mean, I'm not saying the Road Warriors didn't deserve to win it. But let's not pretend that that's some kind of measuring stick of wrestling greatness.
All I'm saying is the Demolition. First of all, this whole conversation started because I was actually saying Demolition were better wrestlers. So I don't know where this turned around anyway. But
because I'm picking up our debate from the board where we were arguing over the greatest tag team of all time.
Well, I actually the and I have the board up, but I could find it. But you actually torqued me. It actually started when you said that you thought they were better wrestlers, that the Hart Foundation were just a better team. When you had said originally that that a lot of us didn't remember them, I would have been happy with that and moved on. But then you, of course, had to get the extra sentence in, and that kind of got the whole thing started. But anyway, talking about Demolition, they are better wrestlers than Hawk and Animal. I don't have a problem with that. Not incredibly better wrestlers. I mean,
no, but Bill Eadie, I think, is very underrated as far as in-ring talent goes, and Darso could hold his own as well. So
no, I agree, and but just to debate, and let me tell you something. This is a good thing, not the best tag team part, because we've got a lot of opinions about that on our board, but go to our email us on our email placetobepodcast@gmail.com. Talk about it on our Facebook page. Do you think Demolition were Road Warrior clones? Or do you think they were just a team that looked a little bit like them but really had their own identity? I contend, and I will always say this, the Powers of Pain, and this is not a knock on the Barbarian and the Warlord specifically. To me, the Powers of Pain were the Road Warrior knockoffs, not Demolition. Powers of Pain looked exactly like the Road Warriors. Demolition did.
Hopefully we'll get some feedback on that from the listeners out there.
I'm curious what other fans think of that. Because I've always, and if Dr. G was on here, he'd beat it to death that Demolition were posers. And that's fine. Some people
he'd be arguing that it's all about mystique and chemistry of the Road Warriors that carried them. So
yeah, well, two guys who hate each other can't win the tag title, so I don't know what you're talking about.
Obviously.
Anyway, but yeah.
All right, so Demolition wins the titles. Their mega push is clearly underway now in Strike Force. Their brief run is come to an end. So we will now move on to the finals of the championship tournament, and that sees Randy Savage go up against Ted DiBiase. Now, I believe Andre comes out with DiBiase here.
Yes.
So now he's got backup. Savage has Elizabeth with him, obviously. But let's get into a little backstory, because this is the one piece of this build-up that I don't think we got into on our Rumble.
No, and I was about to say, I'm going to let you handle this one. You can have this one, because this is just a complete backstage political disaster.
And obviously, like we've said, it's completely, as we always qualify with these, according to legends. Now, we don't know the validity of this. We don't know if it was one of those old Herb Coons RSPW things that caught steam and rolled along.
Right.
That we saw a lot of back in the day. Speaking of Bill Apter, actually, I'm watching this Nitro from 1996, and they're recapping Halloween Havoc 96, and he's actually at ringside taking pictures. It's pretty funny.
That's funny. He went through a lot of hair. He went through some weird hair phases, too. He got balder, and then it got more of a mullet, and then he cut it, and he went through some weird phases in the late 90s with his hair. But
okay, so anyway, so according to legend, Ted DiBiase was slated to win this match and the title before the year started. That was the original idea. Savage was going to eventually regain the IC title from Honky Tonk Man at the main event before this show. Accordingly, Honky's contract was up, and he threatened Vince that he'd leave for the NWA with the title if he wasn't allowed to keep it and not job to Savage. Vince got pissed but had to cave. He didn't want Honky showing up on NWA TV with the IC belt. So Honky was allowed to keep the belt, and Savage was still promised basically a consolation prize that ended up being a bigger prize. So he gets the world title here instead of DiBiase. As the story goes, Savage would have passed the IC title to somebody else and fought DiBiase for the title at SummerSlam. So, DiBiase seems to be the guy who gets screwed in the end of this. I don't know how much of all of this is true. I don't know where they were at this point. If they wanted to have a heel win this tournament and walk out as champion. I mean, DiBiase clearly had the push to do it.
Right.
And it would have made sense storyline-wise as well. So, I don't know. I don't know if it's true or not, but it's always just been an interesting story of how much, things could have changed coming out of this show.
Yeah, you think about that, and I think to myself, if Savage was promised a title, was he specifically promised one here? Because you probably could have done it anyway. You could have had DiBiase win this anyway, and just have Savage win it at SummerSlam. I mean,
yeah,
I don't know where Hogan would have fit in it, the whiny little bitch that he would end up being, but they could have probably had Savage win it at SummerSlam anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So, I feel bad for DiBiase. Poor guy. It's not even his fault. And trust me, Honky would pay this back in spades for the rest of his career.
Yes.
I think my goddaughter got a win out of him at some point. So, it's convoluted and weird, and Honky had a lot of nerve, pulling this off when he got this pretty much as a gift that he didn't really earn in the first place. I think that's what annoys me most about it is he had the gall to be a prick about it when really he didn't deserve it in the first place. So, but the match itself, well, it builds. You know, it's a typical Savage match for this night.
Mm-hmm.
DiBiase's beating the snot out of him. Savage's tank is pretty much on fumes.
Right.
But it's more the psychology of the fact that every time he tries to do something big, a real big move to get the momentum in his favor, there's Andre to cut him off the pass. And, you know, and Savage does a little whisper in the ear to Elizabeth. Elizabeth runs off, and sure enough, we all thought after the 25-minute pose down that he wasn't coming back. But come on, this is the '80s, folks. You're never going to see a show not end with a little red and yellow dabbled in. So
yes, yep. So about a minute after Liz leaves, she comes back out with Hogan. Hogan sits at ringside. Grabs a chair, sits out there. And of course, the big moment comes where DiBiase hooks on the $1 Million Dream. The referees turn around, arguing with Andre. Hogan slides in with the chair, drills DiBiase in the back. Savage hits the big elbow, wins the title, and of course, Hogan, Savage, and Elizabeth all celebrate. Jesse, of course, is flipping out big time, that Hogan interfered. And it is kind of bullshit when you look at the whole night, when you look at it as a whole. First of all, Hogan should have been DQ'd and not a double DQ. And then here, of course, he cheats to help Savage win. So it's kind of odd booking for your top face.
Yeah, but unfortunately, Hogan is just one of those characters that it's really hard to do anything without making him look like it. And of course, him being a creative, meathead,
Mm-hmm.
He wasn't going to do anything to make himself look bad anyway if he could avoid it. So unfortunately, bookers paint themselves into a corner with him. And if this was the best they could do, this was the best they could do. But my brother was ecstatic. I remember when we were watching the tape because I don't think he watched it live either. We were legitimately happy for Savage. I mean, it was pretty cool. It was a pretty cool moment to see somebody different win. I mean, Hogan being in the ring, it was almost like from a psychology, not a psychology, but from a positive reinforcement for the average 80s fan. It's okay. Our hero likes this guy, so it's okay that he's champion. It was almost like you're telling the orange goblins or the red and yellow Kool-Aid drinkers, of course, which I was, and you would eventually be as well. It's okay. Savage is okay. See, Hogan likes him, so it's okay.
Mm-hmm.
He can be champion. None of us have to go crazy and flip out. Who is this guy? How dare he hold Hogan's belt? Of course, Hogan was thinking that.
It's crazy though too how quickly they elevated Savage from a upper mid card heel to a major babyface champion headliner. I mean, and this is really this is a company at the time that kind of took their time with a lot of these turns and pushes that around this era. So to see a guy just kind of quickly turn face, then all of a sudden be given the keys to the kingdom was very shocking.
Yes, it was very shocking. The question is, and I posed this to you, who would technically have been the second babyface in line at this point? Then, if from a distance, Savage didn't seem like the guy that was quite at that point yet. Let's put it this way: when the tournament started, who would you consider the number 2 babyface in the company?
I mean,
it's tough to think.
I'd have to say Steamboat based on history.
Right.
Knowing what we know now, he obviously was in the shitter, politics wise, but to the fans, I think he was still a legit player.
Right.
He had won over Rude at the Rumble, and he was still pushed as a threat. So I'd say him and maybe Bigelow, I guess, at this point were the next 2 guys in line.
Yeah, and then when they both knocked out in the first round, you're like, well,
I mean, it was painfully obvious once Hogan got eliminated that Savage was making the finals. It was just a question of whether he was going to win. So on that end, it was a fairly predictable tournament once you got to the second round, but still very well booked, I think. And the show as a whole was well booked. The more I watch this show, it's funny because you kind of would think it's the other way because nostalgia shows, you'd think you would like them less as they go along, but I actually start liking this one more every time I see it. I always kind of thought of it as a long, boring show, but the more I watch it, it really isn't that boring. It moves well. The matches are all pretty well paced. I don't think there's any match really over 10 minutes. I think one hits 10, and that's about it.
Well, the 15-minute draw.
Oh, right. So outside of that, everything else is pretty brief and
Right.
to the point. So when Savage and Gorilla and Jesse are great at commentary as always, really pushing the importance. Really, you have the great Jesse stuff flipping out over Hogan and all that. So, they could have shortened the show up a little bit and tightened it up if they wanted to cut off the 6-man, the Warrior Hercules match, or the Battle Royal. Any of those probably could have went. And you could have had a tighter show, but for a one-time epic WrestleMania with a tournament, I'm fine with it at this point. Of course, this show famously was up against Jim Crockett, putting on his first ever Clash of the Champions on free television on TBS, kind of paying back Vince for Survivor Series. And of course, that show would have a classic 45-minute match between Sting and Ric Flair, which destroyed any match on this show. So,
yeah, absolutely.
And it was at this point, I think, that the pay-per-view companies finally told both of them to cut the shit, or else they were going to drop both of their stuff. So they pretty much stopped after this. They would do one more time, one or two more times going forward, but pretty much the warfare kind of died down here. So at a whole, I like the show. I gave it a B-. I can't say it's one of the greatest WrestleManias ever, but it's definitely a fun WrestleMania to watch.
Yeah, I concur. I also gave it a B-. And it's funny because anytime Crockett would put a show up against Vince, and this is probably where you have the line drawn in the sand of the purists versus pop culture war debates in the 80s, because every time Vince would put, or Crockett would put a show up against Vince, his matches were always better. Except for, I guess, our last vault when we talked about Rumble 88 and Bunkhouse Stampede, because Bunkhouse Stampede is just an unwatchable piece of crap. Good luck when we have to write that one soon. You're going to kill yourself. But yeah, the show as a whole is I don't think of it as fondly as you do. I don't hate it. I don't hate the show. 5 sometimes gets a little draining to watch, but when we get there, we'll explain why. But it's a good show to watch. I think this is another case where Gorilla and Jesse kind of really spice it up for me. They really make the tournament so special and so amazing that you don't take away from the fact that the matches are painfully average. Demolition, as they would from here on for the next 2.5 years, would establish themselves as huge crowd favorites and be and their stuff seemed to always be looked forward to when a big show would come along. And give Axe and Smash credit. They read the crowd right, and they would keep them heels for a little longer. They wouldn't turn them face immediately. Those are the kind of characters that you can't you can't just turn them face.
It has to be organic,
really, yeah, it has to be something really special, and they would do that. We'll get to that down the line. Would I throw this show in on a whim? I don't know. Maybe. I'm not saying I would never watch a show again, but if I was looking at my wall now, I feel like watching WrestleMania. Maybe I'll put in 4. I don't do that, but I don't dislike the show. It's just I
think it's a good background show.
Yeah, it is. It's a show that you can, if you're doing something else, if you're writing something, or you can have it on the background, to kind of have in your mind. But it's not a show that you can sit and go, I need to watch WrestleMania 4 right now.
Last month it was on 24/7, and it was my go-to for 2 weeks straight, go-to falling asleep show. Just kind of throw it on, and I've seen it enough that I pretty much know it, like the back of my hand. So exactly. I just kind of fall asleep to it. So
yeah,
but
for us, just quickly, for you and I who are junkies for tournaments, this is like the holy grail.
Yes.
Because tournaments are always good story. When you're dying, I think the bookers right now, 2011, could probably use a tournament because they're dying for anything right now. Tournaments are always the best way to create storylines because it's all about drama. It's all about a build, and tournaments are the best for that. And this one may go down. I know everybody likes to talk. Newer fans like to talk about the Survivor Series 98 Deadly Games, and we were talking about the Attitude Era. Obviously, we'll get there. But that's nothing like this. Sure, both matches are quick, but like you said, Justin, you hit the nail on the head. These matches, 5.5 minutes, but it was a pretty good 5.5 minutes.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas, the Russo era, it was 2 minutes and 15 seconds of junk. And it just, it was all about the ancillary. But, obviously we're getting ahead of ourselves. But, I don't dislike this show. B-. It's one of the better WrestleManias. It's just not one of those ones where I'm like, you know what? I'm bored. I'm going to throw in WrestleMania 4. I don't do that. But it's not a bad show. Not at all. Not at all.
No, and I thought it was actually a good transition to talking about our beer pong tournament because
Yes.
the two men standing tall at the end of the show, Macho Man Randy Savage and Hulk Hogan, the future Mega Powers, ended up being our choice. We did get one suggestion on our Facebook page, but unfortunately it came about a day too late for us because we had to make a decision because we had to get our team name in, and we also had to order a couple shirts. But we want to give a shout out to our buddy Jeremy Nichols on the Facebook page. He suggested we go with Strike Force as the theme name. Wear matching white jackets and use Mr. Perfect's theme songs to have the perfect beer pong team. So great suggestion there, Jeremy. But unfortunately, we had already ordered our vintage, to quote Michael Cole, t-shirts.
Yes.
Scott ordered a old school Hulk Hogan shirt. Mm-hmm. And I ordered the classic Macho Man purple shirt with the sunglasses on it. So we will be tag teaming up as the Mega Powers for this beer pong tournament. That's our team name. I currently have my beard growing in. Scott will be shaving his goatee into a mustache.
Yep.
I'm going to purchase us some bandanas this weekend, hopefully.
Nice.
I'm just deciding now if I'm going to wear tights or just pants. That's what I'm down to. So
I don't have any yellow shorts, so.
But we are.
I don't have any sweatpants. Maybe I'll paint lightning on my. No, that's the Hollywood one. But
we have agreed that we are going to do the Mega Powers handshake after every cup hit, and any time we maybe hit the double and get the balls back, we'll do the posing and the finger in the air. So we get a lot going on. We're going to either play the Hogan or the Savage song off my phone for our entrances as well. So
yes,
we're going to hopefully have some pictures up. We'll take some pictures next Saturday and post them on the Facebook page for you guys to check out. So it's a little Halloween come early.
Yes, it is. We are in it to win it. So
yes,
it'll be a big deal. And unfortunately, we don't know any beautiful women to be Elizabeth. So when we make it to the finals, and someone can walk by in a bikini while we sneak some balls in the other team's cup. So
maybe we'll I might do some live updates from the tournament that night on the Place to Be Podcast Facebook page. So keep an eye on that too. We'll do a live updates throughout the night. So
yep.
Let's get one more piece of feedback here from Jeremy Nichols, actually. Earlier in the week, he said he had a question for me and you. All things considered about this year's WrestleMania, am I the only one thinking WWE used the pageantry of former Manias to get by with a lackluster show this year? It almost seems like they said, it's WrestleMania, people will eat it up, or forget about worrying what to put out there, just put something out there, it's Mania, or am I overthinking it? I gave my response on the board here, on the Facebook page. Jeremy, thanks for the feedback. That's a very interesting take on Mania and definitely has some credence. I actually think they have been relying on the WrestleMania brand to sell the show for a few years now. While others have had marquee matches, they still bank on the Mania name to draw the viewers in. That's evident by the fact that they release and sell tons of tickets well before matches are even announced. This is definitely a good topic for future episodes, though. Thanks for listening. Jeremy comes back, says thanks for taking the time to answer my question. You make a great point with them selling tickets months ahead before the matches are announced. I wish I got it in before tomorrow's show. Loving the podcast. Look forward to each one. And Jeremy actually found us through Graham Cawthon's historydirty.com. So that's cool that he goes through there. So Jeremy, bring the feedback. Keep it coming. Thank you very much. Like I said, we'll always read it on air. And that's a very interesting point. Maybe one we can get into. We are planning this week to do another show talking about the draft and Extreme Rules. So maybe we'll touch on that as well there.
Yeah, I agree with. I tell you something, Jeremy, and we'll talk. And again, I concur. Thank you very much for the feedback, and keep it coming, everybody, regardless of where you find us. And I actually, you'll appreciate this. I'll mention at the end about Graham that I did on his Facebook page today. But I don't think there's any doubt the fact that they got The Rock to host gives it away right there. Anytime you need multiple guys from the past to load up a WrestleMania, you know that in some way, shape, or form they feel that the card is not strong enough.
Yes.
For instance, look at WrestleMania. Where did we first see it? WrestleMania, I guess 5 or 6, 7 maybe. Maybe it was 8. There was a WrestleMania that was very devoid of celebrities because I think they really trusted the card.
Yeah, eight.
You know?
8 didn't really have many outside of Ariba McIntyre.
Yes, Ariba McIntyre. And WrestleMania 7 really didn't have any of that guys standing around like Henry Winkler and those guys, but they really didn't do anything.
Yeah, but they still talked about them. Well, no, they did. They sold a lot of the show. When you watch the build-up on those Superstars episodes, they do talk a lot about Regis and Trebek and Marla Maples. They did push the three of them quite a bit.
That's true. But then, when you knew that you had Rock and you had Steve in a prominent role in one pay-per-view, you know that they're trying to really pitch the sizzle because there's not much to the stake. So I think Jeremy's point is very valid. That I think and you know what, the card wouldn't have been that bad if it wasn't booked like shit. Right. You know, I mean, the card as a whole wasn't terrible. We talked about it in the preview show. Mm-hmm. The card as a whole wasn't bad at all. It just was booked lousy. It had nothing to do with the card. It was just executed like garbage. You know, but yeah, I definitely think that they putting Rock and Steve on the show was definitely to kind of frosting over the fact that the cake wasn't as good as they thought it was. But great comments, Jeremy. Mm-hmm. Keep it up. But speaking of Graham, you'll appreciate this because you're a big Dusty guy. Everybody uses Foursquare on Facebook to, you know, where they are, and sometimes you're like, that's cool, and sometimes you're like, I really don't care that you're at work. But he obviously had a story. For those that don't know, Graham is a newspaper reporter in North Carolina, and he was at Kings Mountain City Hall, and I said to myself, there's actually a town called Kings Mountain, yeah. And I goofed and I wrote, you know, it doesn't even sound like a real place. It sounds like a venue for like an NWA pay-per-view. And I just had this vision of Dusty going, you know, something Ric Flair, we wrestle a Kings Mountain, you know, like some awesome 86 Dusty promo, the Kings Mountain Civic Center or something. Yes. You know, he got a chuckle out of it, but I thought it was pretty funny that he was like in this place that sounded like a fake, like that's where Bunkhouse Stampede should have been, in Kings Mountain.
Very true.
But it was pretty funny. But Graham is a great guy, and for those that haven't had a chance to catch to listen to that podcast, please do. He is a tremendous guest. Mm-hmm. He's got that nice deadpan Southern drawl, and even though he's born in Alaska, but he's so integrated into the Southeast. He's got that nice Southern, slow, nice delivery, very laid back. He's a great guest, and he'll definitely be on again. So catch that podcast, man. I had a chance to listen to it yet. It was tremendous. It really was.
Yes, and also want to give a shout out to our buddy Balls Mahoney on the board. He's been waiting anxiously for our 4 review. And also we have another suggestion on our board from our buddy Steve, requesting that we do a podcast about wrestling movies or wrestlers in movies. So that might be an interesting one we can get to at some point as well.
Hell Comes to Frogtown, please.
I want to do the Hogan anthology. All my favorites: No Holds Barred, Suburban Commando, Mr. Nanny, all the greats.
They Live. Well, They Live has I won't do it tonight, but I have a great. I don't know if I've mentioned it. I don't know if I've told the story in a previous podcast yet, but I got a great story about when I saw They Live in the movie theater. It's pretty funny, but I can't think of any. Well, there's plenty of movies at Ready to Rumble.
Oh yeah, Ready to Rumble. I can recite for you. I've seen that thing a million times.
Yes. So
that's it for the feedback, and that's it for the review as well. So I guess we've got to wrap things up. I think next week we're going to go ahead and have, like we said, just kind of the WWE wrap-up show, hitting up our Extreme Rules picks in the draft. We'll be back with another Vintage Vault. Of course, it'll be SummerSlam 88. And we have a few concept shows as well we're going to be maybe getting into in the next few weeks. And as well, once we get to May, we have Leanne Griffin coming back on with our buddy Josh Richer. We're going to do an Office podcast as well. So we got a few cool things coming up. So that's it for here. Scott, you have any more forethoughts or anything else before we go?
Well, I please continue to give us any ideas for shows. I mean, we talked about sports movies. If anybody has an idea that you think that you'd like us to talk about, let us know. We'll talk about anything. We don't care. Mm-hmm. Like I said, it's the place to be. It's not just wrestling. It's not just sports. Leanne hopefully will get us some good summer barbecue recipes. Some wings or some burgers, something juicy, and just about anything. And we might have a contest for someone who could do the over/under on Andrew Reach's F-bombs on his next appearance.
Well, I don't know if you saw it, guy. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but Jordan was teasing Andrew about his F-bomb problem on our Facebook page, so they had a pretty good back and forth there.
It was pretty funny.
Yeah, so check that out as well.
Yeah, but no, keep listening. Again, place to be podcast at gmail.com. To my man Danny out there, Danny, hop in on this Road Warriors debate. I'm not. This one's a lot closer. I'm trying to defending this is a lot tougher than WrestleMania 3, so I need some backup here. So hop on there and help me out with the Road Warriors. He's probably
we may have to have a bromance tag match with you and Danny against me and Andrew. That's what I'm thinking.
Who's gonna be the special ref? Well, it can't be Matt Rotella. He'll fall asleep in the middle of it.
Yeah.
Maybe it'll be. I don't know. Maybe it'll be maybe my brother. He hates me. He'll probably turn on me anyway.
I was going to say Derek, but I don't think he has the cardio to hang in and do that match.
Yeah, probably not.
No, I can't wait till tomorrow now when he listens to this and comes crying to me, and I am making fun of him.
But there's plenty of outlets, as Justin and I hammered to all of our great fans. Facebook page, the email address, place to be podcast at gmail.com. Sign up on our message board, bigelow34.proboards.com. It's absolutely free. We talk about all sorts of stuff. Might be starting a MLB Pick'em soon. I threw an idea out today. I don't know if I'll talk to you about that off mic, but I threw an idea about that. The territory war is going strong. It's kicking. I was actually had a chance to actually sit today and read some of the shows. I unfortunately don't get a chance to read them as much as I should. They're outstanding.
Yeah, those guys are doing ridiculous work right now.
Yeah, some guy I think put up an AWA one today. One guy does Ring of Honor. One guy does XPW. It's crazy. Please hop on. We talk about everything all the time. And again, enjoy the podcasts. We got a lot of stuff to talk about soon. Our next one will be next week, and like I said, we'll talk about the draft and we'll do our Extreme Rules picks.
Yeah, and our next one's actually already number 25. So just want to thank everyone too for listening. The hits have been way more than we expected this early on.
Yes.
And the following we have is way bigger than we expected this early on. So, thanks guys for that as well. So, all right, Scott, it's pretty late here on the East Coast, so let's go ahead and wrap things up.
Yes.
Hope you guys enjoyed this trip to the Vintage Vault, and we'll leave you with the current World Heavyweight Champions.